Hello and welcome to Tuesday's Tea Talk. Remember that this program is made by the RESILIFE team in King's College London as a part of the projects that help students that are living in the residences feel more comfortable and finding that the residence is a home. I'm currently staying in one of them, the name is Atlas. But also because of the current situation with the COVID-19, this program is now open for anybody that has actually access to internet. So we welcome people from around the world, maybe not students from King's, but students from other universities or professionals from around the world as well. The topic that we will talk today is sex education. And just a disclosure, there can be some talking about anatomy, there can be some pictures shown, experiences about how are we taught about sex education in different countries. So of course, if at any moment people are watching feel uncomfortable, feel no shame of just taking a time out and then come back if you want. We all have a time to explore about different topics, and sometimes sex can be difficult for some people to speak. And in my case, it was when I was a teenager, and then even an adult, it was not the easiest conversation to have, especially with maybe family members or older people. So of course, that's also something important, and you need to always consent also to what you're watching. So that's why the disclosure. This talk also is going to have some links with the sessions that we had in the past. We have talked about the LGBT plus community, for example, about mental health, about body positivity, about volunteer work. We also talk about even climate change. Like everything is interconnected in that sense. So I'm really excited for this talk, and I'm really happy for the speakers that we have. We are going to have 5 speakers tonight. In the current moment, we have 3, but I'm going to introduce the other ones. Remember, for everyone that is watching on Zoom or Instagram Live, that you are more than welcome to share your own comments, experiences, opinions, and questions. If you have a question on Zoom, you can either express it on the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question and raise your hand. If you are on Instagram Live, you can type the question here, and when the speaker is done talking, I'm going to share the question as well. And for those ones watching this on YouTube after, some of the speakers are going to share some information with you, for example, websites or Instagram pages. So if you have any questions for them, you can actually contact them before. So that being said, I want you to meet our speakers, and I would like to start with you, Uma, if you can introduce yourself.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Uma. I'm from Finland and I study medicine at King's. I'm also the president of KCL Expression for the coming academic year, and we volunteer at schools and teach sex ed.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming and for sharing your own experience on how it is to be a King's student and part of an initiative as well. Then we have someone called Danilo. You may remember him if you saw the body positivity talk or the LGBT plus community one. He is a psychologist from Chile. He works in the transdisciplinary sexual education school, and he's going to be sharing some of his thoughts as well in the matter. He is not able to attend the session because of the time difference, but we pre-record a video, so I'm going to be showing that to you after. Then the third one is going to be Caro. Caro, if you want to share with us a little bit of you.
Yes, I'm Carolina Silva. I'm a pelvic physiotherapist. I am a sexuality specialist because I made a post-graduation on the issue, and right now I am a speaker on a lot of countries talking about sex education, like the issue we're going to talk today.
Excellent. So we have Uma from Finland, we have Danilo from Chile, and where are you from, Caro?
I am from Colombia, but I make treatment for patients with sexual dysfunction on Chile, and I live in Brazil.
So we have a whole combination there.
Yeah.
Well, talking about Brazil, our next speaker is from Brazil. So Diego, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Diego, I'm from Brazil. I'm going to talk about how sex education is treated in Brazil and how it affected my relationships and the way that I relate with people as a whole. I am not working in the field, so this is going to be a very personal sharing, and this have been my learnings through the past 3-4 months. These are just my reflections. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here to listen to other people speaking as well.
Thank you so much, and we always appreciate when people just want to share their own experiences as well, because one of the ideas of the T-Talk, even though it is to have a very diverse panel, or if you can say so, the idea is to have also people that are not necessarily view as experts, so we can actually have a cup of tea with someone that maybe it could be a friend, it could be a student, it could be younger than us, but they all have something to say, and we all have experience regarding this. Because it's part of our life, and even if we have never had sex before, that doesn't mean that we don't relate to this concept. The last person is Rodrigo from Chile as well, part of the Safe Space LGBT Community Center, identified as a non-binary person, so the pronouns are they. It's going to be the last of the speakers for tonight. Again, we welcome all your questions, and the same for you, the speakers. If Caro is saying something and then Diego, you have a question for that, please, you're welcome to join and ask her that. The same if Uma, you want to, because you're the first, you want to stay the whole session and maybe share some of your thoughts, or thinking, oh, I wanted to say that, but I forgot, perfect. That's like a conversation looks like. So we are going to treat it as that. Again, for everybody that's watching and joining now, we are going to have a talk about sex education with a very diverse group of people. And we are going to be starting with you, Uma. So if you can take the stage.
So thank you for inviting me. I think talking about sex ed is so important because it's such an essential part of education we receive as young people. And I really like to stress that sex ed is something we can continue to teach ourselves or learn in uni, in our community, and that really ties into the work we do at KCL Sexpression. So just a bit of background for those who don't know about Sexpression. Sexpression UK is a charity in UK that where volunteers run sex and relationship education in different communities. It started back in 2000 in UCL, so University College London, and now has over 20 branches in different unis around the UK, including KCL Sexpression. And just why I felt like joining them is because the sex education that I had while I was in school in Finland was so incomplete and just unsatisfactory. It covered the bare minimum that sex ed should cover. So I remember being taught anatomical diagrams of genitalia, how to put a condom on a banana, and then just the most basic principle of consent, a no means no kind of thing. And that was it. And it didn't feel empowering, and it didn't feel like it prepared me for, the real world. And we talked about only one kind of sex, so penis and vagina sex, which is not inclusive at all. And it just leaves so much out of what sex can be. And especially when it comes to consent, not having the nuances of consent discussed in a classroom just felt so disappointing, because every day, again and again, we see how important teaching people about consent is, because we always see how it goes wrong. So yeah, I just had a very negative experience with sex ed, and that really, really made me want to help change things. So when I initially joined KCL Sexpression, during our training day, so training day is where we train volunteers before they go ahead and teach sex ed in communities. So during our training day, we looked through lesson plans that Sexpression have, and it felt so great seeing more comprehensive sex education offered to young people. And it felt like so exciting to see exactly the type of sex ed that I wish that I'd gotten as a young person. Just something more discussion based, something relevant to young people. And I'm just going to give a few examples to kind of make my point. So, for example, Sexpression's contraception and STI lesson, it covers all different forms of protection for different kinds of sex. So it really, it doesn't matter what type of sex you have, you still have the knowledge to know how to stay safe and protect yourself and your partner or partners. And it also gives young people information in case, protection doesn't work or goes wrong, because we all know no form of contraception is 100% effective. And it's so important to have young people have the information to make decisions when things go wrong and feel like they have options, And the consent lesson plan is definitely one thing that really motivated me to join, because the way that we talk about consent at Sexpression is nuanced. It goes so much beyond the principle of saying no, and it talks about, or we talk about, free consent. So how you can give consent when you're sober, when you're not under the influence of any substances like alcohol, and when you're not feeling pressured or emotionally manipulated. So for example, if someone says that, oh, if you really loved me, you'd be having sex with me, that you wouldn't be able to give free consent in a situation like that, because that is emotional manipulation. And then we talk about active consent and how body language is incorporated into that. So making sure that your partner is an equal participant in every step of the way and confirming consent every step of the way, just to make sure that you're both equally invested in whatever sexual activity you're doing. And a final lesson that I really, really wished I'd had as a young person is the sex and media lesson, because more often than not, young people don't hear about sex for the first time in a classroom. It's so pervasive in our media around us that sex ed is not their first introduction to that subject. And it's very, very important to have discussions with young people where we talk about how sex in the media, in movies, TV, and pornography is very, very different to sex in real life. Like one example that we like to bring up is that in films, we rarely see people giving verbal consent before performing an act. And for so long, seeing someone initiate like a kiss, maybe a bit aggressively, was seen as romantic and passionate. And just making sure that everyone understands that though that may work in that context, in that film, in this fictional situation, it doesn't translate like that to real life. And yeah, just making sure that young people just are very aware of how much editing goes into media content that they then consume. And in their impressionable minds think that this is what the reality is. And I really, really wish I'd had that as a young person. But teaching these lessons to young people now, it just feels great knowing that we're headed in a better direction and we're constantly improving, and talks like this make sure that we are talking about what we could do better and problems that we had with sex ed that we don't want future generations to have. And then finally, kind of tying into what I said before about continuing to learn about sex outside of school, in uni, in your community, that's something KCL's expression really tries to do in King's. So we try to create events where open discussion and learning is possible. So we have this campaign called Don't Be a Prick, and there we give free mini cacti in exchange for a few-minute discussion about consent. And the point of that is everyone has some type of basic idea of what gaining consent is, but having a face-to-face discussion, we challenge that idea and we bring it up to date. So we talk about what consent would look like in new scenarios that are very uni specific. Like often there's alcohol involved. What if you see a potentially off situation happening in a club? What would you do? What would you feel comfortable doing? Just stuff like that. And then also, like, some of the events that we're very proud of are ones where we've talked about like FGM, period poverty, like LGBTQ plus mental health, and female pleasure. And these are all just very important aspects of sex and sexuality that we might not have been exposed to before, but now luckily we have like time and resources to learn about these things at uni. And yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about, and I'm glad we're doing the work that we're doing. So yeah,
sounds like it's a very important part of your life now, and it's amazing how sometimes, even if you're not that clear when we are younger, like we notice that something is missing. Like you were like, maybe this is not the sex education that I should be receiving, or there's something missing, or it's only about this, like there's nothing more. And then of course you have like the contrast of like pornography or movies or media, and you're like, so I'm taught this in one hand, and the other side is like abstinence or something like that in some countries. And I think it's amazing how sometimes we see that there was a lack in the past, and then we try to make it up for it. So I imagine you have learned a lot from sex expression as well. Like there's some things that you didn't even think about, and they are there, and they were always part of sexuality, but you just were not introduced to that. And now you are doing that for other people. You are making people feel more curious, and I think that's a very important part of everything that has to do with sexuality or identity, if you want to mention that. There's not an only way of doing things. And if we feel that there's one perfect explanation or answer for everything, then we sometimes can feel very lonely, because we feel, I'm the only person feeling this. I won't talk to my friends about this. I won't talk to my professors or my parents about this. So I don't have money. I don't go to a health professional. So who do I talk to? And I think sex expression, at least for what I know, is trying to be that little bridge between, I didn't even knew I have this question, and now somebody's having a conversation with me about this. Yeah,
no, definitely. Like I feel like I've learned more during my time in uni than I ever did about sex before. And kind of tying back to what you said about like loneliness, it's so reaffirming when you're out there talking to young people and talking to uni students, and you see just so much positive change and people really knowing their stuff already and are willing to go into like deep discussions with you and just deepening their knowledge. And you just feel very hopeful knowing that this is what the future is. So yeah.
I have like one hypothetical question in mind. So you mentioned a lot about consent, and how you were disappointed on the type of education you receive about that, and now you're very proud of how things are in sex expression. So for people that think that that if you are consent like that strong, like you need to constantly consent, you're taking all the fun. So what type of, like, I don't know if you have heard that before, like somebody talking to you about this, but how can you reply to something like that?
Yeah, so this is actually one of the questions that we're trained for. So we very often hear that, you know, constantly asking, is this okay, would take the fun out of it, would take spontaneity out of it. And that's just not true. You can bring consent and verbal communication into a sexual encounter through like dirty talk, just kind of inadvertently saying what you want to do and then making sure the other person is okay. So it doesn't have to be, you know, dry, and it doesn't have to be a pause button. It can build anticipation. And yeah, there are just very different ways to incorporate talking about consent in a sexual context without taking away from the moment.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people think about it as a contract, like, okay, let me do the checklist and then we can carry on. And of course, if that will be the situation, it will be a very different encounter if it's like playful, like you mentioned, like it's something that you can actually make playful. And I remember hearing the same type of arguments when people were talking about condoms, or like if you introduce that, you're going to take the fun away. But you can actually put fun into that if you're thinking about like pleasure, for example. It doesn't have to be like the worst case scenario. And I think also when people think about consent, it's much more, I think, easier to identify it always when you're looking from a distance. But like if we see a terrible situation when somebody that you don't know is forcing you and you say no is no. But I think the trick or the detail is that when it's something that is very normal in the sense of you are with your partner, a person you have already had sex with, and you have said yes before, and then you just feel today no, and that person is like, oh, come on, like seriously, like, you know, I love you. And that person is not forcing you with like a gun into your face. But that's the blurry part when you're like, should I just say yes? Because, well, and I think that's why I love the video of the tea, and especially because it's a title. Because sometimes we want a cup of tea, and sometimes when we are making it in the process, we say, no, I don't want to. And you don't have to just take it because you already made it. You can change your mind. And it's not an easy thing sometimes. But that doesn't mean, oh, I said yes once, I need to say yes every time, because if not, I will be, I don't know, betraying someone or tricking someone or lying. It's not actually like one answer or the other. It's like a whole continuum as well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I was so disappointed by the way we handled consent back when I was in school, because that is something that's so important to say out loud, especially to a young person, that, you know, that non-consensual sex doesn't always look outwardly very aggressive. You know, it can just be like pressuring and then kind of giving into that pressure, or not knowing how to vocalize what you're feeling. And I think especially as we still in our society teach women and girls to be nice and accommodating, it's very important to reaffirm that we can still say no, and we shouldn't feel guilty about that. We shouldn't feel like, oh, because we said yes before this, we now have a duty to say yes. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And just to summarize some things that you were mentioning about the educational part of sex, and something that can happen in schools in some countries, in some other countries it's just only for the family. But in my idea is like, if the education is not given by school, parents, friends, that doesn't mean that the search stops. And I think there's a big fear of, if I teach a young person, and I don't know, 10-year-old, about anything that has to do with sexuality, they are going to be wanting to have sex like the next day, or they're going to become obsessed. And if I don't say anything, then I will prevent them from that world. That is also like the assumption that sex has to do with something wrong. Especially, of course, when you're like a young person, people will tend to say no. But that doesn't mean that the search will stop. And I think that's one of the difficulties, that it can happen that maybe somebody is not interested in sex and won't look for it. But if you type that on Google, you have so many answers. And we sum to that movies. It doesn't happen to be porn. It can be movies like 50 Shades of Grey, for example. When somebody that says no, then okay, yes. And then you have the power imbalance as well. And social media as well. So if we don't have these conversations with our loved ones or our friends, somebody else is going to be having with them. And it can be through a screen, like we are doing now, but not actual people. So that's, I think, the danger as well of leaving this completely to like randomness.
Oh, 100%. I don't think that, like, you know, having knowledge about sex means that you'd have it earlier, just like you said. Like, I feel like it just ensures that our young people are safe and making like more informed decisions, especially because they already know about some stuff. It might be like warped by media. So we're here hopefully to guide them to make better decisions and talk with them about what they've learned that might not be the way they think it is.
Yeah.
That was a bit convoluted, but I hope you followed my train of thought.
I have a last question for now, but like I mentioned, if anybody has questions for Uma, and you can ask that 1 hour later, yeah, or you can look for Sexpression on Instagram as well. How did you realize that the education that you were receiving when you were in school was incomplete?
Well, I'm a bit of a book nerd. I love to read. So, like outside of lessons, I'd like read everything in our, we had a health textbook. So I'd read everything about like sex and like different types of contraception. And I'd just be like, wait, like, you know, we weren't taught about this. And then also just talking to friends, as I grew up, honestly, just being like, there's so much that we weren't taught. And just consent is such a big part of it, especially as a woman. Like, yeah, just realizing it wasn't, it didn't take long to realize how incomplete our education was. And sometimes women especially don't have the luxury of staying ignorant to such matters. So yeah, that's kind of what like woke me up.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience and for letting us know about this initiative called Sexpression. If anybody else wants to look at it, they have a Instagram page. I think they have a website. I don't know if you want to tell us the details.
Yeah. So we're on Instagram, Sexpression KCL, and then we're on Facebook as well. So KCL Sexpression. And if you're a King student, you can find us on KCLSU, the webpage under Societies.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again, and I invite you to stay with us till as long as you can during the talk. And if you have any other things you want to share, please, you're more than welcome.
Oh, I will. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. Linking to the person that we have after Uma, one thing that she mentioned is that sometimes schools do have sex education, or maybe even your family can teach you, but sometimes it comes only from one aspect. So you can talk about, okay, you have a partner. That partner is a man and you're a woman. So you assume heterosexuality. You also assume that they want to have a partner and not multiple partners, or like polyamorous, for example, is often left behind. And also for people that don't want to have sex, usually the question is more about, you should not have sex till this age. But what if you don't want to have sex when you're an adult? Does that mean there's something wrong with you? And I think asexuality is also something that's usually left very, very far away from the conversations. The person that we have next is called Danilo, and he's a psychologist. He's going to talk a little bit about his own experience growing up in Chile and how sex education was taught to him, and also about how it can relate to mental health. So he couldn't attend because of the time zones, but I have a pre-recorded interview that we did yesterday, and I'm going to be playing that. If anybody has any problems with the sound, please let me know, but it should work just fine. Hello, Danilo, and welcome for the third time to our Tea Talks. I'm very, very glad to have you here with us again. And for all the people who are listening and they don't know who you are, some people may know because you have been here for a talk about the LGBTQ community as well, and about body positivity. So if you would like to introduce yourself again, so we can start with your part of the talk.
Yes, no problem. Well, my name is Danilo Urbina. I'm here with Namu, my dog. We are now in Chile, in South America. I'm a psychologist by profession, finishing my official training as a sexologist. And about the topic of today, I have been working in several schools, mainly with teenagers, but also parents and teachers, professors, doing lectures and workshops about sex education. And also, I think it's good to mention that I'm a part of LGBT plus community.
Thank you so much again for being with us. And for everyone that doesn't know, you can check out the other talks because Danilo had very interesting points as well. So if we are thinking about the Tea Talk about sex education, what do you feel motivated you to be one of the speakers tonight?
Sex education is a very motivating topic for me because it's part of my work area, but also because it is a very in-depth issue at a public policy level and very deficient in its real integrality when it is implemented. In general, we find it difficult to talk about sexuality. We have a very bad base in our own sexual education, and therefore it is a major challenge for several generations. And thinking about my own life, I had little formal sexual education, and when I refer to formal, I am talking about participating in a planned activity that allows not only access to information adjusted to age, but also to develop skills in relation to this information and work on attitudes that are related to that. A concrete example could be when children are taught anatomy, it is important knowing how to name them, the information, develop skills to recognize them and see the differences that may exist between people. And in addition, we need to work on the relation we have towards our bodies, our self-esteem. And in that sense, to value body diversity. The thing we talk in body positivity video. And I think I got a good sex education from my family, but very little from my school.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, that at least in Chile, and I have been hearing stories from other countries as well, like Pakistan or Bahrain, there's little or no sex education in schools. So everything is just left to the parents, and sometimes they don't have the skills or the time or the knowledge to do it, or maybe it's not according to their values. So sometimes some kids never get to understand what sex education means, and they have to discover that from their own. And sometimes it can be very overwhelming as well. And thinking about that and about body positivity, like you mentioned, and self-esteem and values, how do you feel that sexuality and mental health relate?
Oh, they are related in many ways. The sexual dimension is an extremely important area in people's lives. And it's not only related to the sexual act, it includes identity, affections, emotions, corporality, human diversity, and much more. And clearly, these areas are also related to mental health. If I have a sexual identity that I cannot integrate, that makes me feel guilty or discomfort, it is likely that it will significantly affect my mental health. The same can happen if I don't have a good relationship with my body as a result of the contamination of beauty stereotypes in the media. If I do not have positive strategies to understand and express my emotions and affections, it is likely that it will affect my relationship with myself and with other people, and thus also my mental health. They are highly related, and that is why we have to understand sexuality from a transdisciplinary perspective.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. And something that we have mentioned in every single talk, I think, is intersectionality, diversity, transdisciplinary or multicultural things, because it's not only about, like you mentioned, the sexual act, it's about basically everything that makes us humans, our sexual orientation, identity, etc. And I do feel that it's very important that we have knowledge also on that, and not only on anatomy, that sometimes that was the only sex education that was available. So for example, if you're thinking about that, if you're thinking about education, do you have any suggestions on how somebody can start a conversation about sex or about sexuality, maybe in a school or a university or even within our families?
Oh, many. We could have a whole seminar about this, but I will start with the basics. We need to establish an initial framework from where we are going to carry out this sexual education. In my current job, we work from a sexual rights approach, which are basically human rights translated into the field of sexuality from a gender perspective and from the understanding of broad human diversity, and also about this intersectionality and transdisciplinary view. We also have ethical and scientific views on how we teach sex education. Talking only about the importance of abstinence does not work. There are multiple studies about the importance of that, how suggests that it does not generate a real impact in postponing the beginning of sexual activity, in reducing the rates of sexually transmitted infections or unwanted pregnancy. And on the other hand, more comprehensive models can delay it. Now, it must be spoken from a positive connotation towards sexuality and corporality. The idea is not to talk only about the negatives and the risks, but also about pleasure. There are also studies showing how this helps to have a better sexuality in lives. In fact, last year, in October, with Escuela Transdisciplinaria de Sexualidad, we went to Mexico at the annual Sexual Health Congress from the World Association of Sexual Health. And the topic of this year was about sexual pleasure and the importance of it in sexual education and our lives.
Yeah, I think this is like a movement. It's not only about what every family does or what one government does. It's about a whole movement that is like moving forward in that sense. And like you mentioned, it's about human rights as well. One is the right of knowledge, but also it's the right to completely understand how it's not only about one thing. It's not only about I'm going to get pregnant. It has to do with my own identity as a person as well. And that can also change. I don't have to feel exactly the same way I felt 10 years ago and 10 years in the future. So I do think like exploring this and having that openness of mind to just explore and be curious, it's something very important. And experiences like you mentioned going to Mexico also open like more ideas, because you have people from other places, and not everyone, again, in South America has the same opinion. So I do feel those are important experiences that everyone should have, even like the people we call experts. We also have a lot to learn in a lot of different fields. I remember, because like for people that don't know, I had the pleasure of working with Danilo in 2015, I think, and doing some workshops about sexual education to teenagers. And one project that I only saw the beginning of it, but it was a book called 100 Questions from Sexual, like Teenager Sexual, yes, that book, exactly. So 100 Questions of Teenage Sexuality. So I would love if you can tell us a little bit about how that process worked, or like if you can show the pictures, because it is a very amazing book. I still have it in Chile.
Oh yes, this book was a beautiful work that we carried out in 2016 in the context of an adolescent program that sought to bring them closer to primary health care in Chile. It was a team effort from different disciplines, but the main focus were the questions from the adolescents. We as professionals and as adults could have selected what teens should know. However, the most beautiful thing about this experience was that it was developed in continuous participatory spaces with teenagers, listening to their most frequent questions, how they thought it was the best way to illustrate them, and the size of the book, the writing style, etc. One of the most important considerations of sex education is listening to and directly involving the people we educate. And part of this involves showing at our or looking at our own prejudice and beliefs about sexuality. In the case of children and adolescents, it is essential to look at our possible adult centrism, which could make us ignore that they are subjects of active rights in the development of their own sexuality. You were talking about the values. Yeah. That usually is one of the arguments that family uses to be against sexual education from the state. And the interesting thing about sexual education is that it doesn't limit the family to give their own values about how they think their children should live their sexuality. In fact, we hope that family also involves with sexual education, but that is not a reason to also get sexual education in the schools or from the state.
Yeah, I think that's a very important opinion, in the sense of it's not a competition between family or the government, or family or healthcare, or family or schools or friends or pornography. It's like the information is going to be out there, and I think it's better if we collaborate with each other, like families and schools and professionals from mental health, from health, like physical health. So people can be more informed, and they can also receive a more coherent, maybe, if I can say, put it like that, sort of information, and not just Google things, because the information will be there, but it's so much information that we sometimes don't even know, like, if that applies to us, and maybe we can be afraid, or I don't know. So I think it's important what you mentioned, that things like this initiative, like this book, is not seeking to ignore the families and take over. It's just a guide that actually the families can share with the children, and it can help them to have a conversation that sometimes it can be very hard to have between parents and children, especially teenagers. And I think it can help. So I was wondering if you can tell us, because of the time, one question maybe from the book, like one of the things. the adolescent wanted to know.
Yes, of course. This is a very interesting one. It's the question 43. Yes, can you see it?
Yeah.
Well, it's in Spanish, and this book is online, free, in PDF, so you can download it if you want. If you are learning Spanish, maybe it's a good way to practice. This question is about at what age is it recommended to have sex? If I'm a virgin, at what age is it recommended to lose it?
So it's that the teenagers.
Don't worry so much about age. It is not an important factor, but you should pay attention to other themes. Ideally, you will have planned that first sexual encounter. Which person have you chosen? Do you like that person? Are you thinking of any particular place to do it? How are you going to protect yourselves? Some people have sex for the first time, feeling pressured by a partner or by the group of friends. If this is your case, I recommend you wait until it is out of genuine interest for you and the other person. It could be with a person you have a romantic relationship with, or with whom you feel confident as a friend. It could happen that sometimes it's not 100% pleasant at the beginning, since it will be a new experience. But like many other things in life, it gets better with practice. And this has a drawing of these questions, like planify where you're going to be, with whom.
I love the illustrations of the book. Yeah. Well, thank you again for being with us. Like I mentioned, because of time, we could have the whole webinar about this, and because we also have the other speakers, and maybe they will agree, but a lot of things that you mentioned, maybe they have comments. I would love to hear from them as well. But if you're interested in the book, you can ask me on the Instagram, or you can, where can we access to the book? It's like a website.
Google. It's in Google.
So you will need to learn some Spanish. 100 preguntas de sexualidad adolescente. 100 questions of teenage sexuality. And it will be, I concur, a good way to learn Spanish. So I don't know if you have any last comments. I just wanted to say thank you again for sharing your own experience, as well as your knowledge and your experience working with adolescents. And not far away, we were teenagers as well, asking maybe the same questions, or maybe we're still asking the same questions. So I think it's always important to keep an open mind, that we probably will never have a book of our life with every possible answer. We have to be curious sometimes and just tolerate the uncertainty of how sexuality can be as well.
Yes, and a lot of these questions are not only from teenagers. Probably a lot of adults don't know the answers of these questions, so maybe it's useful for a lot of people. And well, thank you, Francisca, for inviting me invited again to this interesting space to talk about sexuality, because it's really urgent to let sexual education be integral and in every school and from all lives, because we have all life a way, how do you say, like, it's sexuality is in all life moments of.
Yeah.
So we need to make it urgent.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again, and of course, if we have any other talks, maybe we'll see you there.
Perfect.
Bye, and say goodbye to Samu as well.
We will. Bye bye.
Bye.
So that was Danilo's presentation. I don't know if anybody present has any comments, if anything that he said makes sense to you as well, or if you have a very different opinion, you're of course welcome to share that on the chat or here on Instagram Live. And also now, if we think about what he was mentioning, he mentioned a lot about health and about sexual health and about pleasure. And our next speaker is going to develop it a little bit more. The first question I wanted to ask you, Caro, if you have any comments of what Danilo just said before you start, and then of course you are welcome
I
to
think
start.
I think it is very important the work he had made about educating about education with this book, because I think we all didn't have this orientation in that part of our lives. So right now, when I talk to adult people, I perceive that I'm teaching something basic of the sexuality that we didn't get on college, on school, or on our homes. So my area of sexuality that is on the body and it's on the pelvic floor and has to has so much relation with pleasure and arousal and orgasm and satisfaction. It is an area that no one talks when it comes to sexual education. The usual sexual education, it's about like physiology and protection and babies, you know, like reproduction, but none about like the empowerment of our body, the knowing our body, the relationship of me with my own body, and knowing it and getting how it works and identifying changes in my sexual function on the body, right? Sexuality, it's an area, very big area of human being, but I think the education about our own body and its function on pleasure has been like leave it out from a sexual education, and that's what I think he is doing a great job educating on this book.
Yeah, it's a very interesting book. When it came out in Chile, it was, of course, in every news, like people are complaining, we shouldn't have this, let the families decide. We have like a lot of politicians talking about how this should be banned, other people saying, yeah, we like it. So it was like a lot of like different opinions regarding one book that you mentioned. Maybe if you read it, you're just like, oh yeah, but this is simple. But even in that level, there's a lot of things that people thought other people were not ready to hear. It has to do with that.
Yeah.
Are you ready to start now, or?
Yes, I'm ready. I can share my screen.
Yeah, of course. And I also wanted to ask you before we get into the middle of the topic you're going to tell us a little bit about your background before you started studying. If you can tell us why you, Carolina, became interested in this area.
Okay. Here it's a little bit of me. I already said I am a pelvic physiotherapist and I am a Colombian woman, but I didn't receive any sex education at home or at school because my father is a Christian pastor and my school was Christian too. So it was not allowed to talk about sexuality. The sex education that I had, it was on the biology class. So I was just they just mentioned genitals, and that was all. And then at home, I couldn't talk with my parents. They never talked to me about sexuality and pleasure and arousal or something, or things that I would start feeling when I was an adolescent. But I was always like women interested in sexuality and sensations and in on my body. And then I started physiotherapy, and then I discovered this area of physical therapy. And then I went to treat patients with pelvic floor dysfunction, like incontinence or constipation or a pelvic organ prolapses. And then I learned that this had all a big importance on the sexuality of the persons, of the people. So I was just interested in this area, and I started to receive patients with complaining of a sexual dysfunction, and they were not satisfied with their sexual function, their sexual lives. And I identified that the cause of this complaint was basically that they didn't know their own pelvic floor. Nobody ever talked about the pelvic floor and the sexual function it has, or any other sexual function. And then I get to understand too the people who had sexual dysfunction, because they had a background a little bit very alike with mine. You know, never talk about sexuality. Nobody told them anything about how things should work, or how the pelvic floor works, or the genitals works for satisfaction, sexual satisfaction, or sexual function. And then I started to do it. Like, I started to teach people about pelvic floor, normal sexual function physically. And then I became this, like, I'm talking about pleasure, sexual pleasure, and pelvic floor function around the world. And it has been very good for me, and I'm very, very happy about doing this. And like Yuma said, I'm always a passionate person about this issue, and I want to give this, like, this opportunity for the people to know what is sexual function, and that there are many things in sexuality that has been called of abnormal or wrong, or they have been called taboo. But it is not like that. In sexuality, it's a word that is very, very big, and it involves a lot of things. So I think that sexuality is individual, and each one can live it in the way they want, and they discover, because sometimes you don't get the sexuality you want, because you haven't discovered what you can do with your body and with your mind too. And that, I think it's a right for people to know about it.
I think that's very exciting, that even if we feel we have reached a point of, like, I know myself, I know how I react, then sometimes, oh, surprise, I have a new, a new feeling, or maybe it was a different person, or a different, like, smell that provokes something different, and we can always surprise ourselves. I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, and that's very important, because sometimes, now you mentioned smell, I remember people like saying, oh my God, I hate my smell, I feel it, ugh, I don't like it, and I hate it, and I am trying to take it off with soap. And then I come and explain why the smell, and how the smell has a significance because it means you have some bacteria on your genitals, and that bacteria is protecting you. And you know, and that impacts people like, oh my God, I didn't know that. And after they get that knowledge and discover this about their own body, they get like, okay, now I like my smell. You know, a thing that they didn't like at all now becomes something part of their lives, and they understand the importance of it. So that's why I think it's very, very important to make sexual education from a vision very, very big, you know, not only the body, not only the mind, not only the orientation, but everything together in multidisciplinary work. I think it's the best way to make sexual education.
Yeah, I think we can go from something very wild, like what makes, I don't know, babies, to like the smell. So it's like a lot of different areas that you can explore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I wanted to bring today to you like the role of pelvic floor muscles on sexual pleasure. And I will begin talking about the genitalia, because I would say that the genitalia, external genitalia, it's the face of the pelvic floor. And the pelvic floor is like an important area of our body that it's not mentioned too much on our lives. Like maybe women, when they get pregnant, they will hear about the pelvic floor, because it's going to be a big baby growing over the pelvic floor, and that would mean that she could develop an incontinence. But out of that scenario, as people doesn't get information about pelvic floor, if get information about the muscles of the pelvic floor, it will be when they are presenting some pelvic floor dysfunction. But there are today no many information about pelvic floor dysfunction prevention. Okay, so right now I just want to let you know that we have genitalia, internal genitalia and external genitalia, and that genitalia is the same in this phenotype and in this too. You can see here like a gland in green here, and you can see the same glands here in green, you know, and they have the practically the same function. We have the prostate here, very big in yellow, and you can see it here too in yellow, but a lot smaller here. You can see here the testes and the ovaries where the reproductive cells will be producing, and the ducts that will lead these cells out of the body here, and the ducts that will lead the cells here to the uterus. And so basically we can see that we are internal genitalia exactly the same, only in different positions on the body, you know. And so when I talk of pelvic floor, I am making reference of all of these genitals that are inside the pelvis, and including the urinary bladder, the uterus, and the rectum. And then we can, like, if we take a mirror and put it between the legs, we will see the external genitalia, that basically it has to be with the skin of this area and the erectile tissue that we call penis or clitoris. then you can see in this design here that we have the same skin here on labia majora, and the scrotum, on the body of the penis and the body of the clitoris, glands of the penis here and the glands of the clitoris here, and a raphe here that is divided here in this phenotype. So again, we are exactly the same, and the origin of these genitals and the pelvic floor is unique. So it will be differentiated on the 10th week of the development, embryonic development, okay? So when we take away that skin of the genitals, we will see the pelvic floor, muscles of the pelvic floor. And as you can see, it has a superficial layer here with these muscles a little bit smaller here around the vulva, under the skin, under the labia majora, under the perineum, and here always we will see some of these pelvic floor muscles in the superficial layer on the base of the penis, around the anus too, and we'll have a deep layer that is called levatorani here, that are bigger muscles and stronger muscles. And those pelvic floor, muscles, they have important function on sexual function. Why? Because clitoris will be located here underneath these muscles, and that means that these muscles, when they contract or they increase their activity, they will be compressing this clitoris that is erectile tissue. It means that this tissue will get full of blood, and this blood will be retained inside this erectile tissue to increase sensitivity. And the same happens with the penis. These muscles will be around the erectile tissue of the penis on the base here, and it means that when we have inflow of blood inside this erectile tissue, the muscles will contract over this erectile tissue and make the blood stay there, so we can generate an increased sensitivity on this local that is basic and is very important to feel pleasure, because if this doesn't happen, if pelvic floor doesn't contract over this erectile tissue, clitoris or penis, then I won't change my sensitivity, and it won't make any difference than when I am in, I am relaxed, I am not in arousal, for example. So these pelvic floor muscles will be participating on the arousal, sexual arousal, making lubrication, an increase in lubrication, an increase in local sensitivity, making the congestion occur in this area, and making the erection to happening in this erectile tissue. And when this arousal gets to a peak of sensitivity, then we will be talking about orgasm, that is an involuntary contraction of these pelvic floor muscles. And when it happens, there are a release of hormones like oxytocin, that it will be facilitating the next the next sexual response, because it will produce that androgen receptors get more on my pelvic floor and on my genitalia, and that means that when I get androgen receptors there, I demand more testosterone and more estrogen that are required to facilitate the arousal, the sexual arousal. So it's important for us to have a pelvic floor functional, so we can make these changes during arousal. And then if the person wants and like and desire to have orgasm, then facilitate this orgasm, and that way it becomes like a cycle, you know, that more arousal that facilitates orgasm, orgasm facilitates a sexual desire facilitates arousal, and we go like that, improving sexual function and satisfaction. That is an emotional component, let's say. And so we need to make these changes, we need for pelvic floor muscles to be in a good condition, like muscular condition, and it means that they need to have muscular activity, they need to have the capacity to contract and relax, and they need to make it coordinated, because what we see in patients with sexual dysfunction, for example, is that they contract, okay, but when you say now relax, their muscles like keep thinking like I should relax completely, or I maybe stay a little bit contract, and they don't have this coordination. And the sexual function of these muscles need to be coordinated, because they can be all the time contracted, because they won't let the inflow of blood, for example, on the erectile tissue, or they can't be absolutely relaxed all the time, because they won't have the activity to contract over this erectile tissue and then produce the increase on sensitivity. They need to have force, because they can contract like with a force, minimal force. They need to have a good force, so they can like squeeze really over this clitoris or penis, and they can get tired, because if they do like the contraction and they get tired, the inflow that came to the erectile tissue will go out rapidly, and then the erection, for example, won't last the time that person wants. So we need to train these muscles, train these qualities in muscular tissue, so the function get the changes that this person wants. When these pelvic floor muscles are with trigger points that are painful points on the muscles, or they are rigid, like they have a muscular stiffness, or they have weakness because they can't contract, they have no force, or they get tired too fast, then we can have a person with sexual dysfunction. And this sexual dysfunction have been classified, and the more common sexual dysfunction is dyspareunia. That is the painful intercourse, but actually this pain can be before, during, or after intercourse. and they have a subclassification where the pain can be localized on the vulva, on the glands of the penis, on the testes, on the anus, and then we have to identify which muscles of this that I showed you here are the ones that are presenting this dysfunction or these trigger points, for example. And then we can have arousal dysfunction where the person can get a genital arousal. They, as I was saying before, they can get this difference of sensitivity in this local area, and that makes like the intercourse could be painful, or the sexual activity, whatever it is, won't be like satisfactory, because I am not feeling anything different than when I am not in the sexual activity. So the person feels like I'm not feeling nothing. Like it was all like it was nothing for me. It has no point at all, and that could become a dysfunction because the person starts to feel like unsatisfied. I want to feel, I want to enjoy it, I want to have sensations, and and so it could be like a problem for the person, and then we will call it as a sexual dysfunction. And the other dysfunction about arousal can be that the person enters in this sexual arousal, but then he or she or they can stop feeling it. And even if they have orgasm, this arousal doesn't go away, and then it interferes with the life of this person, because can go to work, can sit down, can stay calm. So it will be a dysfunction. And about orgasm dysfunction, it will be present when the person feels that his or their orgasm is premature. It happens before they want it to happen, or it is delayed. It takes too much time for this person to get to their orgasm, or there are no orgasm at all and they want to have orgasm. We have to understand that sexual dysfunction can be given to a person, like, Carol, I don't have orgasm. Oh my God, you have a dysfunction. Like, no, I don't have orgasm, but I'm happy, I like it, I enjoy it, I'm satisfied with my sexual life. Then I am not anyone to tell to that person that she or he or they are with a sexual dysfunction. It's like sexuality, it's individual for each person, and they have the power to say what it's good for them and what it's not. And when it's not good, it's not satisfactory, it's not something they like, then we can train the pelvic floor to improve that particular person wants to achieve.
I was remembering the lines that you mentioned once in a previous talk I heard of you.
Yeah.
That people can take long time and reach an orgasm or the arousal, for example, and maybe their partner they're with, they are very fast, and then it's a coordination thing as well.
Yeah, and that's so nice that you talk about it, because when you have your sexuality alone, let's say I make sexual activity in solo with me, many times it doesn't disturb to these persons, like I am okay with my sexual activity, with my sexual life. But when they come to share it with someone else or other persons, then they probably, maybe their curve or sexual response doesn't fit the curve of sexual response of those people they are sharing their sexuality, you know. So it can happen, maybe I take a long time to get my orgasm, but I'm perfect because, you know, it's only me. But when I'm with someone else that wants or have this orgasm before, then oh my God, like you can do it, you can have your orgasm, but I have to continue because my response is like that. And some people come to me like saying, I want to have a sexual response a little bit more alike with my partner. So can you train me? Yes, I can train these muscles for you to call your orgasm before and make a little bit of coordination in this to sexual response, you know. And that's the point of training the pelvic floor muscles for sexual function. Do with your sexual response what you want and what you need and what you like. So maybe today I want to have only excitation and I want it all the time, like up, you know, like all the time feeling nice, feeling right, and all the time with my sensitivity rise. But maybe another day I don't want to keep on arousal. I just want to arouse a few minutes and then I want to go to rest, you know. So we can do it with the muscles of the pelvic floor, but to do that we need to know them. Yeah. We need to understand how to contract. We need to understand what types of exercise my musculature can do, and then I can be a master person who makes whatever whatever they want with the pelvic floor.
There is a question. They're asking if this has anything to do with Kegel.
Yeah, it has. Like I'm going to explain that. Kegel was a gynecologist that started with these exercises. He like discovered that when contracting the pelvic floor, he could treat urinary incontinence in women after childbirth. Mm. So since Kegel until today, we have made a lot of research, and today we know that pelvic floor training, it's not only contract and relax, contract and relax, contract and relax. And most important, we know that can be done when you are peeing, okay? Yeah. You need to do it in any other moment that is not when you are urinating. And today we know that the training must be applied specifically for each person, because all of us have a pelvic structure and a pelvic function different. I don't have the same pelvic function that you have, maybe, because we have different lives, different activities, different muscle mass. So we need to evaluate how is the pelvic floor, what those muscles can do. Like, for example, they can contract. Okay, now can they contract and stay contracted by 6 seconds, or they contract and start to like relax without you wanting to relax, you know? So right now we call it pelvic floor muscle training. We don't use the Kegel exercises anymore.
And I think it's a lot that has been done, and sometimes we only know the specifics of like decades ago and we stay with that. Like,
yeah,
the routine thing, I think a lot of people can try to do Kegel when they're in the toilet, because you can actually or feel it more, but it can be something not good for the health. So
Yeah, and it results that when someone do it while is urinating, like, oh my God, I can do it. Then they keep doing it when they are urinating because it's like something they can see. They can, they can see that they could this flow of urine, but it would affect the urinary tract, and it could produce some real problems on urinary tract. So we don't recommend it. It's not good to do it because I don't want to attend patients with urination infections just because they were training their pelvic floor in the wrong way, I want to teach about the right way to do it, so they can improve their sexual function and their pelvic floor function and not make the opposite.
So how could you, of course, very basically, because we don't have a lot of time and we don't have all the equipment, but if that's the bad way to do it, what would be the right way to train this?
It would, first of all, it should be necessary to go at least at one pelvic floor evaluation by a pelvic physiotherapist. That would be important. And if you can't go because you don't have one near of you, then take a mirror, put it without clothes, put it in the middle of your legs, and try to think you want to contract around your anus and your vagina or your penis, and see how the anus go inside, like it was going inside your own body, and that's a pelvic floor contraction. And then try to see how much times you can do it, and for how long you get to contract and maintain that contraction. That's a way to start.
Perfect. Yeah, because I think this is sometimes considered like an invisible training because you can be training and nobody will know. So
yeah, nobody knows
if you're doing it right or not, because it's very hard to tell if you go, like you mentioned, to a specialist maybe, because it's like something that is inside, so you don't see it corrected visually, something you feel.
Exactly, and that's why physical therapy will put a biofeedback that will tell you on a machine how you are contracting, how much you are contracting, and how long you can get this contraction on time, for example, and how many times per day you should do it.
Yeah, so it's like a very rigorous process as well.
Yeah, like going to the gym of the pelvic floor.
I think another stereotype, if we think only about Kegel, because that was the name that has been referred a lot to the pelvic floor, is that it's something that only women can do?
No, actually, anyone can do it. Like, because as I show you in the last slide, the pelvic floor muscles are the same in all the persons. So you can do it no matter what, no matter if you are a sport person or a sedentary person or a pregnant person. It doesn't matter. You can do it. Those are your muscles.
Yeah, I think that's very encouraging in the sense of, you were talking a little bit about this prior, that we all have, our bodies are unique to us. So even when we are thinking about, and go back some of the talks, we talk about body positivity and we talk more about like, I don't know, legs, face, the color of your skin. But when we talk about the sexual genitalia, there's also this stereotype that one type is better than the other and that it looks different, so it means it's wrong. And with men, the science also has to do something with that, because we also compare that, and sometimes we feel, oh, if I have a different type of what I'm used to, like for example in porn, then I feel ashamed and I don't want to show it, or I feel like I'm stuck. And
Yeah, and that only worse the sexual response, because you don't feel comfortable with your vulva or your penis or your anus, and then like you don't want to show it a lot, or you don't want to look at it a lot, and you don't want to touch it. And so we make from pelvic physiotherapy a big work on people look at this, love their genitalia, because when you love something, you take care of it. And we need this person to train the pelvic floor, and train it's like every day, an exercise routine. So I need this person to like this part of their body, so they train it, because otherwise they will, oh my god, I have to do these exercises, the Carolina let me, I don't like it, I don't want it, and then there are no good response to that.
Yeah, I think that's a very important message, that we need to love what we need to take care of, and that can be about genitalia, it can be about our own body, and what was, like, for example, Uma saying in the beginning about consent, about feeling, I want to feel respected, and even if I'm with a person that, like, it's my partner, so I usually say yes. I want to be able to say no and feel respected because of that choice, and not because that's a problem. Because
exactly, and it's empowerment, like this is my body and I want to share it. Okay, I don't want to today, I don't want to, it's okay to, and that's very nice. So that's why I was telling before that in sexuality there we need to work in a big team, so we can reach every area of the sexuality and potentially it. I don't know, but make it better.
Yeah, and I think also it's very empowering, like thinking about the pelvic floor before we finish with you, is that it's very empowering to know that it's something that you can control, because it's an exercise that you need to do for yourself. You need to start trying, to start exploring. So it's like you have the control of the contraction, and if the contraction can help you have a better sexual life, then you have a little more control of that, and it not only depends on what social media tells you your body is to be like and all of that. And especially when people are talking about people with disabilities, for example, like, no, they cannot have like a nice sexual life, and that's not true, because there's so many aspects to that, and it's not only genitals as well. It's
exactly
touching,
yeah, and there are so many times to love this body, and one of them, or a good beginning, is to know it.
Exactly. We need to start, like, well, the topic of this is sexual education, sex education, and we have to start us at knowing about us in that sense.
Yeah. So thank you very much for listening to me and to have me here today.
Thank you so much. It's always very interesting. I always learn something new, and I don't know if there are any questions from the people who are here on Zoom or on Instagram as well. And if you can stay longer, then of course you can comment on Diego and Rodrigo's hello. Yes. So thank you so much again. And I don't know if you want to leave your Instagram or any contact details if people have more questions and they want to reach.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram like la.carosilva.
So in Spanish,
Caro Silva. La Caro Silva. And nothing, you can talk to me anytime. I answer every message. So if you want to ask me something, I do, right? Then you can find me there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Caro. And we were talking about difference and about how we experience sometimes the pressure of having a certain type of sexuality, a certain type of approach to other people. And this leads to our next speaker, Diego, that he wanted to share a little bit about his own personal experience in this called sex education. And first of all, thank you for being here and talking about this, that for a lot of people it can be even a taboo thing. Maybe you can talk about sex, but talk about what you feel and how you experience it a different way as well. And like you mentioned, it's also something that helps us to be more reflexive and to learn more about our own lives and questioning if this is the type of life that I want to have. In this aspect, of course, like we mentioned with Danilo, sexuality crosses a lot of different aspects, not only about the sex, it's also about identity, it's also about if you feel comfortable with your body or not. So yeah, it's your time now. So
Yes, I believe that the first thing is that we already have set in society things that are normal, and then everything else is abnormal and everything else is not acceptable. And the moment that you feel that you fit in more in the abnormal box, everything gets blurry and everything gets complicated inside of you, because it's something that was already mentioned here. Then you start feeling that you're not fit, that you're not normal, that you are an outcast, and how does this process inside of ourselves? And just to begin with, I would like to share a bit how sex education was around me while I was growing up. I was 29, and I am 29, and in the past it was quite difficult for people to just hear the word sex and to open conversations. So for a man, no matter if you're gay or not, you had to go for women, right? So there was no such a thing as you have different sexualities or different kinds of gender. So this was very binary world. We were all supposed to fit in the cis box. And I remember that while I was growing up, I was constantly hearing from my friends at the age of 14 or 15 that their father or their uncle took them to a prostitute, and this was their first encounter with sex. And this was something really big for teenagers at the time. You had someone from your family taking you to a prostitute that they knew already, and this was how you had the first encounter with sex, without having any proper talk or without even being able to say, I want this or I don't want this. You were just expected to be there. And as a teenager, this was not what happened with me. I was super afraid of it happening, actually, because it was it had a lot of pressure. It had a lot of taboos around it. And I could see that for my friends that this was the case, they would come back to us proudly saying that they were successful in whatever happened. I had my first time and it was like this, it was like that, so now I'm a man. So these kind of things and these kind of experiences, they were part of our reality, and they really shape how we perceive ourselves. So you are a successful man, and you are only going to be masculine if you have sex with a woman. And I remember that for some of my friends later on in life, they came out as gay, and I just reflected upon this, how aggressive it had probably been for them to have sex with a woman without them even wanting, just to please their parents or their relatives or whatever. For me, the only talk that I had was at school. As Uma was mentioning before, it's just the basics. It covers the very basics of everything that you need to know about sex, but it doesn't explore other aspects of it, and it doesn't explore the spectrum as well. So it's just heterosexual men and women sex and how to handle that, but you don't understand how does it affect you as a human being and how it connects you to other people. It's very phallic centric, so it's very penis centered. Everything revolves around the penis, and then it becomes a curse that you keep carrying on for the rest of your life, because you're not going to talk to anybody, and you're not going to understand what works or doesn't work with you. You just go with the flow. Something that I also noticed, and something that I was discussing with some of my friends lately, is that you feel forced to even say no to women, because as a man, this is how you're supposed to behave. And this, I believe, that it relates with what Uma was mentioning about the consent. you are consenting, but you're feeling the pressure, the peer pressure of I am a man and I need to prove myself, and this is what I have to do. This is who I have to be. And then you create a persona, you create a character that you have to play. So this is me relating with women. I'm going to be a sex machine. I'm going to always be in the mood. I'm always going to be there for them, whatever they need. I'm going to give them pleasure. I'm not going to worry about my pleasure. And then sex just loses the purpose of it, in joining you and your partner, and it just became something mechanic. It's just a repetition of an exercise. It is really weird, and it is something that, because we don't talk about it, and because we feel that if we open our mouths to talk about it, we're going to be judged, and then we are not going to be men anymore. It is not what a man is supposed to do. We just suffer inside silently about all of these things. So I would recommend, it doesn't specifically talk about sex education, but it talks about the whole masculinity topic and how toxic masculinity affects the way that you relate sexually with other people as well. It's a documentary called "The Mask We Live In." It's on Netflix. It's super amazing. It really opened my eyes to some things that I had inside, and now I can see this is also normal. You stop feeling that you are weird or that you are inappropriate, to start relating to other people, and this, I believe, that is really important.
Yeah, the mask.
The Mask We Live In.
The Mask We Live In. I will definitely check it out. I think I haven't seen it. Hearing you, I was like, it has a lot to do with Uma was saying about consent, and how difficult, if you're a teenager and somebody from your family that maybe you even admire says like, come on, you need to be a man, and you maybe don't feel secure enough, or you feel nervous, or you feel, I'm not ready to do this, or like you mentioned, maybe you feel you don't like women, or maybe you don't even want to have sex and you're asexual, but you need to do it. And you feel pressure to say yes, and that's another part of showing that you didn't actually consent. But when you have the power imbalance and when you have the pressure, it's something so hard to say. So somebody from outside could say, why didn't you say no? Because that was not an option. Like, even if I know the word no, but that was not an option. And for people that maybe thought they were an option, maybe they said no, but then in another context, they can be judged. But you're still a virgin and you're a man, how come? Or how many girls have you been with? And I think it's so different from what I have learned as a female, what a female should do. And it has a lot to do with the should do. Like, if you're a female, you cannot have a lot of partners, because that means that, oh my God, you are a different kind of woman, you're not going to be respected. And sometimes for men, at least in South America, the context we are talking about, it's completely the opposite. Like, you have to have a lot of girls, always girls. They never talk about homosexuality in that sense. And you need to like choose the type of women that you will praise to other people maybe. And at least in my own experience, a lot of my friends that were men, they lied because they didn't want to deal with the fact, I haven't had sex, or I didn't do it, or it didn't work. They usually lie and they said, yeah, it happened. And sometimes the pressure makes you lie even.
Yeah, it's very complex, this part of the line part, because it relates about us with our friends and peers, lying about what happened or didn't happen. It also affects the way we talk to people, and we're going to lie to achieve this. Like, sex is the goal. It's a number. You need to add that number for you to be considered a man. And then you would have a scale of, okay, you are a successful man, you are an alpha male, and then you're not just following others around. So inside of the group, you would have to lie, and then for women, you would also lie to achieve what you wanted. And then it goes back to the consent part. Like, how can you freely give your consent if you're not aware of the whole situation? And then you're telling people, hey, I really like you, and in reality, maybe you didn't. Or that you're really in the mood, and in reality, you're not. You're just forcing and pushing yourself. until you get there, you know.
Yeah, I was thinking about the myths that sometimes are around sexuality, and if we're thinking about, like you mentioned, cisgender heterosexual men, there's one myth that they always want to have sex. So if we have the case that this person is with a woman, it can be a partner, it can be somebody that they just met or a friend, and they say no, it feels like even rude. Like I have seen so many, especially in movies, if the guy says no, he's a bad person, because how can he reject her? He should be there for her, like sexually available always, because how can he say no?
It, I went through something like this once or twice, probably, in a moment that I was not in the mood for anything, and the moment that you say no, then it raises a lot of red flags and questions. Why don't you want it? Don't you love me anymore? Are you cheating on me? Who is this girl that you were seeing that you don't have the energy to be with me sexually? So you have the pressure based on these stereotypes and these assumptions that are commonly conveyed to people. Something else that I have noticed is, because we are not talking about sex, because there's no proper sex education, men are also put in one box, and it's all men are equal and they all want the same thing. And the way that we understand men is by watching porn. So this is what men want. As a man, you look at that and this is what a man should want. So the moment that you start watching a lot of porn, and this is the kind of education that you're going to get, it really affects your perception of who you are and who your partner is. And I do believe that it objectifies people to a certain extent. And then you just become a machine, and then you're just there for the sake of doing something very automatic and scripted, and this is the flow. And something that is quite interesting is that on when I had my first time, I was feeling a lot of pressure and I didn't have pleasure at all. Like I couldn't enjoy, and it just kept going for a very long time. And I kept blaming me for that, or and telling myself, uh, "You're probably gay, you know, like maybe this is not for you, and this is how you ended up finding out." And for one entire week, I was super stressed, super anxious, just thinking and reflecting and going back to that moment, feeling that, okay, now I am gay because I didn't enjoy it, because it was not pleasant at all. And then I remember that I went to my mom. My mom is a doctor. And of course, I didn't want to talk to her because it was not a common topic. And I asked her to schedule a neurologist for me because I thought there's something wrong with me. I don't want to accept that the fact that I'm gay. I also don't want to accept that it was her or the moment or anything else. I have a problem. So maybe it's a dysfunction. And the moment that I told my mom, she asked me more about it, and I said, well, it was my first time, and this didn't happen as I have seen in the movies, in the porn movies. And then she just laughed and she told me, "You're just being stupid right now. Like, this is the pressure that you're feeling. You have put on so many layers of things that you should do, that you must do, and how it should be, that you didn't get the time to enjoy." And then I understood, okay, it's not about my sexuality. It wouldn't be a problem. It was just that I got the information from pornography, and it's completely twisted on how it goes. And as we were talking here earlier, having an orgasm is not going to be the end goal. You need to enjoy, and that's it, you know. You need to be feeling comfortable. You need to be with a person that you feel comfortable to do it, and then everything else will come. And the second thing is that because I didn't feel that I could talk to my partner at the time, it made things worse. And I just kept postponing. And I believe now that communication between you and your partner also helps on the long run.
Yeah, I think that's a key aspect if you're thinking about education or sex, that to be able to be a little bit more transparent, not to the world. You don't need to like go from I don't tell anyone to tell everyone. But if you're talking about a partner, for example, maybe it will make things easier if that person knew how you were feeling about sex, for example, or about a certain kind of touch, or about the time when like you meet, maybe you would rather to do it in the morning. Like if you don't express that, then I feel we sometimes get in the feeling that, okay, I need to adjust. Like not everything in life is pleasure, so I need to adjust. And how come I'm going to complain about this little thing? It's just a little thing. But then you have one little thing in top of everything else that you have experienced. Then actually saying, I really don't want to have sex today. If you are a man raised in a culture where having sex was a very important way of proving you're a man, it's very hard for your partner not to feel, okay, there's something wrong with me. Because I was taught the same, that men that are heterosexual are going to want to have sex all the time. So how come is this happening? And if this was never a conversation, then sometimes it's so easy to start hypothesizing what happened. And this is not only, of course, for people that are heterosexual, it happens in every level. And I was also thinking about the word pressure, and how we're talking in the LGBT plus community talk about demisexuality and asexuality. And some people, like you mentioned, they get pushed either by their families or by media or friends to have sex before they want to have sex, like the question that Danilo was saying, like when. But some people are pressured to have sex in that context without then even wanting to have sex. Because after that, they realize I'm asexual or I'm demisexual. So it's not like, oh, I'm afraid. It's like, it's my orientation. I don't want to have sex. But everyone will say you have a problem. That's not good. You need to go see someone because you should want to have sex all the time. And I think there's so many layers that we need to carry that sometimes we lose track of who we are and what do we actually want to do. And I think I was curious when you started the talk, you said like in the last couple of months, I've been reflecting a lot. So I was wondering what kinds of things have you discovered or yourself, if you want to share anything about that.
Yeah. I'll just talk a bit about the process. I started by watching some documentaries on masculinity, and then I decided to just try talking to my friends a bit more so that they could understand where I was coming from and how it happened with me. It is a very vulnerable process to go through and understand, hey, I did some fucked up things that were, I don't know if I can swear. I don't know if you, I don't know if the person that I am today would be proud of the person that I was in the past. So you also need to be forgiving with yourself through the process and understanding that, yes, there were some mistakes on the way, and then you need to acknowledge them. And well, if it is still possible, just go and try to not repair, but go to people and acknowledge that, to open a conversation. So in some moments, I went through this process with my sister. So she's a sexologist. We have been talking more and more about it. And the thing is that I really understood that many times in life, I had sex not because I wanted or because I was in the mood, but because I felt that I had to. And this puts me in a delicate position that now when I'm talking to people, I always need to ask myself 2 or 3 times, do I really want to do this? And am I really interested in something? So this gives a better understanding of yourself. The other thing is that I feel that I'm trying to become more open about the things that I enjoy personally, and I'm trying to explore them more by talking to my partner. It was something that in the past for me, sex is something that you feel, and you just feel if it's good or bad, and that's it. But now I really want to understand and see how it is for the other person, and just say how it is for me as well, because we are different. And even if you have experience with different people, each individual is unique, and you have to try to understand that fully. What does that person enjoy, and what do I enjoy? what are my boundaries, and how can we work with this? Is it something that I can compromise, or is it something that I would never compromise? So having a better communication, understanding yourself, trying to be more open-minded to these differences as well, and not judge others or me during the process. I believe that these were the things that I've been learning more about. I'm still going through this process. It's going the way that it has to be, you know.
Yeah, I think I'm also thinking about what Danilo said. Sexuality is a never-ending process. We tend to think about it when we think about, oh, like we're going to have sex for the first time. So it's usually like teenagers, a little more, then having babies, etc. But it actually comes from when we are born till we die, like in a different way. So it's going to be a long process, but it can be a very enjoyable one as well, to rediscover things and having the time to correct maybe things that you were not enjoying, and now, and not only you, like everyone, I probably am in the same process as well. And I was thinking of a word that has been mentioned a lot, at least from the Spanish culture, that's called affective responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
That has to do exactly what you were mentioning, to like first be respectful and responsible with your own affections. Like if you don't want to, try to make it easier, or at least voice some of that. Like we were talking about consent at the beginning. Of course, there are awful situations where that's a different type of issue. But if you're with your partner, if you're with a friend, if you're with a one-night stand or a date from Tinder, to voice that, but also to think about the other person, because you are with another person, or more than another person if you're polyamorous or polygamous. And it's important to notice that even though I don't have complete control of what the other person thinks or feels, I do have some impact. So if I say something, if I ignore that person the next day because I don't want to have a relationship and just ignore that person, that's going to have an effect on the other person as well. And there are other ways of saying that in a way that is more effectively responsible. Like, okay, good morning. I have to leave now. If you need me, you can call me. And you can have an open conversation. I don't want to have a relationship, whatever. But it was so shown on movies, at least when I was a kid, that you will wake up in the bed of someone else and you will like sneak out. And that's not effectively responsible, because you're leaving that person alone. Like, what happened, with a lot of things to think on their mind as well. So I was thinking about that word when you were talking now.
Yeah, I believe that this relates with the boundaries that you need to have for yourself and make them clear to other people. Because sometimes we have boundaries, but we don't reinforce them. We don't make people aware of these things. And I do believe it relates with this responsibility. It starts with you. It was something that I was even talking to my sister. When it comes to pleasure, you're responsible for your pleasure. Of course, the other is going to, the others, they are going to have an impact, as you mentioned. But it starts with you. You need to be able to understand your body. You need to be able to understand how you insert yourself in that kind of relationship. What are the things that triggers you, your boundaries, your values into that, what you really want from that, so that the other can respect it, you know. And something that I've noticed is that in many relationships, there were some things that I didn't want them, that they were boundaries for me, and I just let people cross them. And you just give this excuse of, it's just this one time. Or maybe something in bed that is not that good, or that you didn't enjoy it that much. Maybe it was even hurting. And then I just said, well, it will get better eventually. So by allowing others to hurt us, we are not being responsible for ourselves as well. So the moment that you're responsible with your feelings and with your pleasure, with your body, and you enforce these with other people, they are going to be able to do this in a better way as well. Of course that there are exceptions, and there are people that are just going to be quite hard to handle, and they're just going to disrespect you in many ways. But it needs to start with us in the end, and the rest, I believe, is a matter of being a decent human being and respecting others the way you would like to be respected, you know.
Well, thank you so much for sharing part of your process with us and a little bit of what's happening inside of a cisgender heterosexual man in Brazil. But of course, everyone has a different experience. But culturally, sometimes this group in particular don't express a lot what they're feeling. And people will mock, will say like, how can you complain? You have sex, you know? So there's not even the possibility to say, you know, I don't actually like this that much because of the stereotypes and everything associated to that. So thank you so much for being so open and talk with us about this. And yeah, and I hope that you also have enjoyed the talks of the other speakers, and we still have Rodrigo there waiting for us. So I don't know if you have any last words before we go to Rodrigo.
The only thing that I would like to say is that we have to talk more about sex as a whole. We need to normalize this because it is a huge part of who we are, and it's a huge part of our lives. It affects the way that we relate with people emotionally as well. These things, they also go connected in some cases. And trying to be more open-minded to the differences and not put them into boxes. Just say, this is different and it's bad. It's just different, and that's it. Maybe it will suit somebody else. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, Fran.
Thank you for coming again. And I hope you stay till the last time. So if you have any questions for Rodrigo or other persons, please let us know. So it's your time now, Rodrigo. I'm really happy that you made it. Yes. So it's your time now. If you can introduce yourself again, I did it in the beginning, but for people that are just joining in as well.
Yes, thank you. I'm Rodrigo Sierra Rosales. I'm a physician and a child and adolescent psychiatrist here in Santiago, Chile. And I'm a board member of a new project, which is called, in English, you could say, Safe Space, that is centered on the attention for LGBTQ community and also for women that have been object of some kind of gender violence in a broad spectrum. So that's what I do on an everyday basis.
So thank you for having the time to speak to us as well. I imagine you're very busy. I wanted to start with the question that I have asked other speakers as well. What motivated you to be here in the talk about sex education?
I think that when I received your invitation, I immediately started asking myself, what is the sex education that I've received? And that the fact is that we are probably talking about all this time that we didn't have any, or if we did have some education, it was centered mainly focused on problems and not to health promotion. That is one of the biggest problems that we're facing now in medicine in general, because in the medical history, we were so concerned about people not getting sick or resolving diseases that at some point we forgot the responsibility that we had as medical professionals to promote health. We just don't want people to like not getting sick. We want people to enjoy themselves, enjoy their life, and that is part of being healthy. So what is this? What is the relation of that problem with sex education? I think that one important thing is that mostly in schools, they teach you something and then they tell you, if you have like any questions, ask a doctor. And I started to wonder, as a doctor, did I receive the proper education as a professional to then provide someone else with that education. And probably the answer is that I didn't, because I received an education that was centered on avoiding problems, basically on fear as an emotion. You don't want an unwanted pregnancy. You don't want to catch an STD. You don't want to this. You don't want this. You don't want that. And it is always centered on disease. Like, we want to prevent disease. But when do we learn about how to promote health in sex and sexuality in general, and to sexual activity, like as a part of our lives? That is the biggest question that I started to wonder. And also a big question is, when is the proper time to give that education? Yeah. When is a person ready, like as a child, or as an adolescent, a late adolescent, and young adult? When is the time? I remember, like, probably 2 times at school. I studied in a Catholic all-men's school.
Still exist.
That is a big, like a big experience, very, very charged experience. And I remember, like, when I was 9 or so, that the teacher was trying to explain how sexual encounters did occur, like what was that all about. And the teaching was centered on the question, how are the babies made? Like, that is the question. So she basically read a textbook that said, when a man and a woman that are in love and properly married have this intention of bringing someone new into this world, they will begin this process of touching them and kissing and expressing their love, so that this new human being can arrive to this world.
So it's like
that's what's about it.
The sexual binary after some age.
Binary.
And love.
And especially related to reproduction. Like, there is no other aspect of it. There is no other function of this aspect of our lives in our general development as a person. So then I remember that I was like 14 or so, and we had this talk with this teacher that made this special occasion to talk about this questioning that some of us may have had at the time. And he started talking about that was normal to feel attracted somehow to another man being an adolescent, especially because we weren't in contact with a lot of women. So this explanation, like, you are all surrounded by men, so you have this sexual drive that is rising in you because you're men, because you have this big sexual drive that is going to explode at this age, and there is no lady around you, so it is going to go somewhere, and that is probably your friend. But the main message at that time was, this is normal. This should not be executed. You don't have to touch your friend. You're not allowed to experience any of these imaginations that you may have, or this idea or these feelings. And you have to wait because this will pass. And later you're going to understand that you're straight and this was just a phase. So that was like the biggest approximation I think I received in school, to talk about the impossibility of feeling something that was not the mainstream, like the being straight, just to be told that I had to wait. So I basically embraced like that teaching, and for many years myself I did believe that I was going through a phase, and later in life I was going to be able to find like the right woman that would correct the wrong things about me. And that was a struggle for many years, many years. As later in life I identified as a gay male, and later in life, in my late 20s, I discovered and finally I identified myself as non-binary. And that has been like another huge step to take and to embrace, because myself as a non-binary person, I feel that I have no references, like I don't have movies or literature, novels, TV series, like we are not represented on the media. I have watched like some movies that are teenage intended, like this story about this kid called Simon.
Yeah.
Love, Simon, I think it's a movie. And I was watching that and I was feeling like very excited, but also very sorry that I didn't have the chance that when I was like 15 or 16 to have had the opportunity to watch someone on the screen and be able to say, I just feel like that. I just had more and more representation of straight couples that were intended only to have children and to marry, and that was the only way possible to be happy. So I think that is still a big problem, because as we are not represented in the mainstream media, we are also not represented in any way on websites or places that you may encounter or find information when you want to know something about yourself. How am I supposed to be my sexuality now that I am non-binary? Am I still able to identify as a gay if I am not a man in a certain way? And that is a problem, because how I find now a partner Do I search for men looking for men? Do I search for men looking for what? What am I looking for? And from that point on, it becomes a struggle, I think. I do want to say that as I work with teenagers, I'm able to hear a different speech every day. I hear them, and um, I'm very excited every day to hear them telling me stories on how they have how they live their lives in a different way, and do not label themselves. And sometimes they don't have the need to label um, to ensure something on, or to be like certain on what's going to be my pathway. I don't need to identify necessarily as gay or bisexual or pansexual because I don't feel any pressure of doing so. I don't feel the pressure to put that label on me because it doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. And that gives me hope, because I think that when they become adults, they can make a difference on this world and how we understand each other at the end of the day.
It strikes me how maybe one lecture or workshop that one have when we're teenagers or kids can have an immense impact in how we feel about ourselves, about our identity, and how we relate to other people. And this phrase that I do agree with you that I hear this phrase less now in teenagers or kids, but when I was a teenager, I heard it all the time. This is a phase. This is always a phase. You're a teenager, so you don't know what you're talking about. Like
you're confused.
And only when you're an adult that's like, oh, I'm 18, I'm an adult, then you can say, oh, I'm a lesbian, or I'm gay, or queer. And I think in the story that you are telling us, it was a long search of who I am, who do I like, do I feel attracted to this type of people, or do I feel attracted to men, women, or is that a word that I feel comfortable? And I think at least in Chile, there was, like you mentioned, no reference, no names. And the inclusive language is something very new. So you don't even have any option. And the only sense that you have is like, if somebody calls me he, I feel like, maybe not. But it's not like, oh yes, because when I was a kid, I have a conversation with a person that was non-binary, and I had a conversation with someone that was straight, and I had a conversation with someone that was trans. It was only straight, or at least in the surface. The only available
surface.
Yeah.
So the other thing that is very different nowadays is that on social media you can choose what to hear or what to read, what to get to know, especially if you have like the opportunity to receive better education and somehow get to the point to know some realities outside your country, especially outside the Latino community, because in certain ways we function very similar in South America or in Spanish-speaking countries and societies. The other thing I was thinking about is that my work has completely changed my view on childhood and adolescence, because when I was a teenager, I didn't have a voice. Like as you were saying, if you say something different, it's because you're confused. It's because you are going through this phase that is going to end, that is called adolescence, that is obviously confusing and like an anarchy of feelings and thoughts, and you don't know what is good for you. And I've had this process when I finally understood that somehow I've always known who I am. I just lacked the references or the opportunities to really see myself out in the world. And when I work with a child or an adolescent today, I work with them knowing that they probably know who they are. They don't need my certification, if you say so, like, yes, you are trans, yes, you are non-binary, yes, you are gay or lesbian. You don't need me to do that. What you probably need of me is that I support you in some way with your parents or with your school or wherever trouble you are facing, because of what you know about yourself. And this brings another discussion about the power of normativity of psychiatry and this responsibility we have on the process of normalizing things and working for a better inclusive society at the end.
Yeah, and also about the law, because when you were mentioning the trans community in Chile, at least, you need to go through a whole entire process to be actually recognized. Yes, you can call yourself a woman now, but you need to change everything. I have friends that are trans and non-binary, and it's like, yeah, it's like society is telling you, no, you need to decide. You need to say, okay, we tolerate that women don't wear always pink and men don't always wear blue, and that men not always want to have sex, and females sometimes they want to have multiple partners. But when you confront them with a different category or different name, then it's like everything that you know trembles a little bit. And there's so many people afraid of change and afraid of difference that they grab everything that they can to say, no, that's not normal. That's not something that you should encourage. But we have been taking what things are supposed to be since the human are humans. We have changed. Family didn't existed a while ago. Then start to build it. Then marriage with love. We didn't have that. So yeah, I don't know, how is your experience, like, for example, if you want to share this with us, of course, when you are seeing someone, a kid or a teenager or parents, do you tell them, I would like to be addressed with this pronoun, or how does that interaction happen?
That is a big situation here, because I think one of the most troubling privilege of cisgender people is actually at the end of the process, they are like the qualified person to say if someone is trans or is not. So here in Chile it's very difficult because parents are always looking for a professional that is not biased. So they look for you and they look for your, did you study, where do you work, how do you think, in some way, to make sure that you are not influencing on my child. I want you to just be a professional and just that. The problem with that is that we're not addressing that as professionals, we have a political position, and there is no way of being there's no way to not have a political position, because the minute when you address this and you say, I have the power to say you have gender dysphoria or not, that is political also. It's not just a medical question. So answering your question, today in Chile, I have to be very careful still on how I present myself and when is the right time to possibly address that issue with my patient and their parents, because if I do it like from the beginning, I am at risk of losing them. And what worries me about that is not like they are mad or something. What worries me is that child or that adolescent that may have lost an opportunity to being, I mean, they may lost an opportunity encounter with professional that is based that base their work on human rights and addresses them as a person that knows who they are. Yes, so and it's a big issue. It's a very big issue, because if you ask me, I would love to be called, as in Spanish you would say, like the gender neutral word for doctor. In English, it's very is so much easier because you are a doctor if you're female or a male, or nor of them. But in Spanish, it's not. I would love someday to be called doctor in Spanish in a neutral way, but that today is not possible. It's not possible, and I have to find ways to express myself and to still be true to myself on my work and on my everyday life, without saying certain things. But that is based on my worries on these children and adolescents that really need someone who addresses them as person capable of knowing themselves and to express themselves.
Thank you so much for sharing that very personal moment. Like, I imagine you live almost every day when you're seeing new families, and I was also thinking, and to end the whole theater that we had today, it's like how all of the speakers that we have today, I just said sex education, but we all talk about when we were a kid, when we were teenagers, and how it starts there. It doesn't start when you become an adult. It doesn't start when you fall in love for the first time. It doesn't start when you watch porn for the first time. It's something that it's about curiosity. It's about knowing who you are. It's about how do I find information about something that I really care about if I don't know where to look or I don't have any reference, like Rodrigo was mentioning, or when you have the stereotype that you need to do things like Diego was mentioning as well, or like Uma mentioned that the actual education, sex education was not even good. Like we had something and that was okay, check. But what about pleasure? What about options? What about not heterosexual couples? What about consent? What about saying no to someone that you love, not only a person that's going to hurt you? And of course, like what Carolina mentioned and Danilo mentioned about health and about taking care of yourself as well. And this is a journey that starts way before 18, and it's not going to end when you are 20. It is something that still goes. And it's a discovery of your own body, of your own way of relating to other people, of how do you want to be named, like Rodrigo was mentioning, and to be there also as a reference for other people. Because you sharing your stories here, it helps other people think about themselves and to reflect, and maybe maybe I have the same issues. Maybe somebody now that's 18 or 16 is hearing and saying, I have the same question. And things are changing. I think sex education is being more open and is considering different aspects, like the LGBT plus community, for example, not only teaching about diseases and condoms, but still there's not like a big source of like thinking about pleasure or thinking about, what if I don't want to have sex? What if I feel okay like this? Why do I need to have that as a goal in my life? And I think it's a very important thing. So when we talk about sex education, we are talking about health, pleasure, discomfort, identity, sexual orientation, pressure, stereotypes, fear, consent, and millions more. And just to finish, and of course we can still keep talking after I finish the live, but I just wanted to mention my own story, and just to bring the memory of a person that I met when I was very young. We didn't have sex education in my school either. My school was a mixed school, private. We didn't have sex education at all. We did saw some of it, anatomy, biology, but that was it. No pelvic floor, no pleasure, no what about if you like girls and you're a girl, nothing. And we were we call it 8th grade, but we were 14, 13. And we were having a class on religion, because my school, even though it was not Catholic, we had religion. So we had Catholic professor, and she was talking about God and about Jesus. And one of my classmates, he was a boy, he wanted to tease her. So he said like, we should talk about sex. Like, I'm going to offend the professor. And she was like, okay, perfect. What do you want to know? And actually we didn't know, but she was also a biology professor. So she opened like a drawer that she had in the room and got a banana and got a condom. And I was like, yeah. And then she started putting words on we were shocked. Like, the religion professor is the only one that has taught us anything about sexual education in our school. And she was so confident about it. She was not like, oh no, you shouldn't talk about it. She was like, yeah, of course, what do you want to know? And she was very open to the curiosity that maybe a teenager has, or maybe these kind of words that you say like, yeah, of course, I'm super experienced. And like, it was no, you're not, you're lying. And it was just a fluent conversation. And I wanted to bring the memory of her. Her name was Lydia. She sadly passed away, but for me, it was a turning point of I was completely shocked that the person that told me about sex education in my school, because in my family, that's something that we talked about. But in my school, it was the religion person, the professor of religion, in my mind, the most far away. And I also bring that because there's also this idea that if you are from a certain religion, then you're not free to live your sexuality. And in some cultures it can be, but it's not about the religion. It's about maybe the culture or the family values or the context you are. It's not about, if you're Catholic, then you need to get married before you have kids. Or if you're a Muslim, or it has to do with more layers. It's not only one answer always. So I just wanted to say thank you for all of you and for staying this long as well. I hope you enjoyed hearing everyone else. Like I mentioned, when I finish the live, we can chat a little bit more. But I want to thank Rodrigo, I want to thank Diego, Uma, Cardo, and also Danilo for being here today talking about sex education. That was the topic. And next week, again on Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. UK time, 2:30 Chile, 3:30 Brazil, and now we have like 9:30 Finland. And if people missed it, you can also watch it on YouTube, probably in a couple of days. Next week, we are going to have a special guest called Ellie Simmons. She is an athlete that swims. She's from the paralytic sports team, and she's going to be giving her own views about her own journey and her life as well. So thank you again for being here, and thank you for people here. And some people are saying that they're sorry that they miss some of the conversations, but again, it will be on YouTube, so you don't have to regret that. So thank you so much. And I hope to see you in different talks and in different moments of my life as well.